Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. First slide here showing a location up the Parks Highway, known as Honolulu. A real nice day up that way. Just some high clouds here at midday today. You know, I always have that really nice view if you ever drive south on the Parks Highway south of Cantwell. Really great view there for quite a ways until you get down into the flatter area as you approach Willow. Anyway, that black hole there is the sun, and obviously not a black hole, but also another couple of interesting features. This obviously a contrail, and then this right here is what they call a lens flare, I believe. It doesn't show up too well here, but you can actually trace this back into the sun itself. And so no, not a comet, UFO, or anything like that, just what's known as a lens flare. And from there, we'll go to the hazardous weather graphics, and there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere in the state for tonight and likely tomorrow and tomorrow night. So we'll move on to satellite imagery. Low pressure here moving northward, kind of a large low center, pushing a fairly decent front in across the southeast coast today, kind of a garden variety system actually, with rain, gusty winds, gales along the coast, gust 50 miles an hour, and not so much wind in the inland areas or the inside waters, except for the normally windier islands and capes there, and you know who you are. Otherwise, heaviest rainfall amounts over the central and southern southeast coast of this system here, and those ranged from anywhere from 1/4 inch to 3/4 of an inch during the half-a-day period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. And you can see this already pushing through, so it's getting a little more tapering off of the rainfall and the winds coming down. Another batch of showers here. Precipitation, once it interacts with the terrain, will probably just be like periods of rain through tonight, and periods of rain will also persist through tonight over the northern panhandle as that front sort of hangs up there. Easterly flow pulling moisture all the way to Kodiak Island. They picked up about 4/10 of an inch today, and then that moisture sliding northwestward. Much lighter amounts here, kind of another trough right back through here, and winds a little gustier with, let's see, 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts there at around Cape Newenham, 35 to 40 gusts on the outer coastline here all the way up to St. Lawrence Island, with roughly anywhere from 2/10 of an inch of precipitation falling at Kipnook, as well as Cape Newenham, and about 1500ths for St. Paul and St. George, here back with the more showery conditions here to the west. Also seeing winds gusting 30-35 miles an hour there at the Pribilofs at both St. Paul and St. George from the west-southwest as that low center spins just to the north of the islands there. And they're not too bad here over the central and western Aleutians, not bad for the eastern Aleutians with clouds, mostly mid and high level moisture, the outer shield of a pretty intense storm that's slowly moving northward, but won't actually, the low center will stay to the south. Otherwise, we've got kind of a thin band of clouds here right along the Brooks Range, and there were areas from the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast, areas of clouds, light snow and flurries, mostly flurries up there, and nothing significant. Rolling this through again, you can see some actually pretty good clearing there rolling into the Queen Charlotte Islands and then northward across Dixon Entrance. So may see some of that showing up at any time there for places like Heidelberg, maybe Klawock, Craig, Metlakatla, Ketchikan, those areas. Otherwise, showers will be rolling in on its heels after that occurs. And on the chart today, roughly front position earlier today, right about here. It's since, I believe, pushed eastward, at least past Prince of Wales Island, and it's kind of hanging up here to the north, but the rainfall is heaviest down here to the south. Still a little bit of a gradient here along the eastern North Gulf Coast, some gap winds through the mountain passes, nothing really significant, nothing like it was on Saturday, and a little breezy here over the eastern Copper River Basin, over to maybe Delta, but again, winds aren't really notable. And Kodiak Island, again, 4/10 of an inch of precipitation falling there. And again, kind of breezy here for the southwest coast, kind of a mixture of precip, mostly in the form of rain right at sea level, then any elevation at all or decrease in latitude or increase in latitude and start to mix with snow. But again, the mounts were quite light, as well as up here on the Arctic coast, light amounts of precipitation as well. And then you can see the outer pressure field of that intense low center that's still off the map there, now be coming up here over the next 24 hours. Low pressure northwest of the Pribilofs there with some gusty winds and showers, another trough bringing some showers into the western Aleutians. For tonight, that low sort of slides back to the northwest here, and that'll keep kind of pull the moisture with it. And most of the moisture of that trough will stay north of the Aleutians, so look for a pretty good overnight period there for the western central Aleutians, maybe some clearing as well. Otherwise, winds and precipitation on the increase here as this front makes it onto the board or onto the frame here by late tonight, early tomorrow into the eastern Aleutians. Not much of an increase in the winds for the Alaska Peninsula yet, but pretty good drying ahead of this. Right up the southwest coast there from the Alaska Peninsula. Lingering showers slowly diminishing there around Kodiak Island. And the southern half of the state, not bad, pretty dry with varying amounts of clouds actually all the way back up to the Seward Peninsula and to the northwest with that good offshore flow. Could be some clearing, but clouds, flurries continue. Brooks Range, Anatuvik, Adigan over to Galbraith Lake, Coldfoot, light snow possible. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Some of that slipping on down the east side here, maybe into Eagle to possibly some flurries along the White Mountains there north of Fairbanks, but again, nothing significant. And high pressure here holding over the Yukon, but slowly weakening there. And this low center weakening off the coast. It's this sort of oozing across the southeast coast with that front hanging up over the northern panhandle. Taking a look at tomorrow, we'll see that low center just troughs out, and there's a trough extending east-west, actually trying to become an Arctic boundary. And look for the light rain to become lighter and a little more intermittent throughout the day over the northern southeast coast. Could end altogether as things become less showery down to the south across Prince of Wales Island. And the moisture in the Gulf of Alaska still lingering here, mostly north, getting nudged to the north as this front swings up and brings increase in the wind and the rain as it weakens and comes northward into Kodiak Island, and gusty winds with rain from the eastern Aleutians right up into possibly northeast Bristol Bay. Clear, but tightening gradient along the Brooks Range there as another batch of cold air drops in on the Arctic jet from the north there. So look for those past winds to be on the increase tomorrow. Flurries possibly there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And then for Wednesday, again, that main low center weakens slowly and stays to the south. Another one forms along that frontal boundary, kind of splits off with the slug of moisture wrapping back around here into the eastern Aleutians and across the Pribilofs. And then this low center pushes up just east-southeast, say, of Kane's Head. And so rain will be coming westward in across Prince William Sound, the Kenai Peninsula. It'll stay wet over Kodiak Island, and kind of finding out where the rain snow line is a little difficult. I'll say from the coast range southward would be the rain, and there'll be a narrow band of rain and snow to the north of that, and then just plain snow probably from the central Copper River Basin and the Wrangles right on up to near or just south of Eagle. Rain moderate to heavy here for the North Gulf Coast, all the way down to possibly Sitka, lighter amounts farther to the south. And pretty good gradient. Looks like a pretty windy day for interior Alaska, south of the Brooks Range coming up. And then no change on the Arctic coast there. Cloudy skies, occasional flurries. Wind's not all that bad, a little brisk here on the west side, especially from Kivalina, Kotzebue, the Seward Peninsula, and not bad out over the western Aleutians. Out there tonight, lows mid to upper 30s with upper 30s for the Pribilofs, and all the way up to St. Lawrence Island, quite mild, and looking at temperatures anywhere from 5 to 15 below or 5 to 10 below over the northeast interior, mid-teens in the Arctic coast, and 30s to mid-40s there for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, near freezing, Skagway, Northway, and Haines. There with colder air with that Arctic high over the Yukon kind of holding there. Milder, approaching 50 there along the central coast. And then Tuesday afternoon, look for highs near 20 in the Copper River Basin, lower 20s, Tanana Valley. A shade above zero there for the upper Yukon Valley, and then mid-20s there along the Arctic coast. mid to upper 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, near 50 for Cold Bay. That'll be followed by Wednesday morning lows running anywhere now from 15 to 25 below zero. With that colder air pushing the 0-degree isotherm Wednesday morning right on down, probably past Nenana to near Healy, extending over to Northway, mid-teens for the Copper River Basin, but even below zero now for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, right around 10 for the central coast. Then quite a range here from west to east into the Bering Strait, 37 at Gamble to 6 at Kotzebue. And then high temperatures Wednesday afternoon staying below zero. Eastern Brooks Range possibly as far south as North and Tokeway, with mid to upper 30s to near 50 over the Alaska Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Rolling into flying weather, we've got a lot of marginal VFR covering the Bering Sea and to a lesser extent western central Aleutians. Marginal VFR northeastward across the Alaska Peninsula becomes IFR. Portions of Kodiak Island, basically VFR southern Alaska, back up to the northwest, and then some IFR here from the eastern interior, upper Tanana Valley, or so, actually a little north of there, on up to the North Slope Brooks Range, and IFR for much of the southeast coast, Zeppelin Canal, Glacier Bay. And for Tuesday afternoon, it looks like Yakutat holds in the VFR zone there with IFR central southeast coast, marginal VFR, Prince William Sound, across the Copper River Basin, cutting off around the Talkeetnas, but extending up up to the Yukon River there. VFR through to the west, Seward Peninsula, and marginal VFR, portions of the North Slope and the Arctic coast. IFR here eastward, all the way into the Kuskokwim Valley, back to St. Lawrence Island, southwestward, but staying north of the Aleutians here. In fact, VFR from Shimia all the way over to Adak, Atka picking up some marginal VFR with IFR for the Fox Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Wednesday afternoon, Zona IFR here, eastern central North Slope, with some marginal VFR down to the crest of the Brooks Range, but south of the mountains, basically VFR. So marginal VFR here along the Alaska Range, it looks like on the west and northwest side of the range there across the Kuskokwim Valley, into the Copper River Basin, where it becomes IFR here around the Wrangell Mountains and the Coast Range into Prince William Sound, down the east side of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, IFR for the afternoon, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, and the southeast coast, Gulf of Alaska, IFR. And then for the afternoon, IFR here holds over the Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle and expands northward there into the 40-mile country and portions of the upper Tanana Valley. Then you get up to around Eagle, or just south of Eagle there, on up to the Brooks Range. You're in VFR, and that'll extend out to the west, Kotzebue Sound, northwest coast, all the way up to, well, at least Cape Lisburne, and then on down the Yukon River Valley across the delta to the coastline. IFR for the Pribilofs, Unalaska, Nikolsky, Kodiak, Southern Cook Inlet, Iliamna, Kamishak Bay, Augustine Island. Also IFR here for Adak and out west to about Kiska. And for the passes, Anatuvik, VFR tomorrow. Adigan looking good also with VFR throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. Could be some clouds, mid-level clouds possibly here especially for Lake Clark Pass, but more clearing as you head north here to Lake Clark, and then rainy, also VFR. And for windy, good VFR. Isabel, VFR, and Mentasta also looking to be pretty good with VFR conditions also for Tanita. And even Portage, VFR, Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR, especially in the afternoon. And for the freezing levels here, 2,000 feet, nudges up to 6,000 feet here over the northern panhandle, back down to 4,000 feet, Prince of Wales Island, Dixon entrance, and 4,000 feet here across the Kuskokwim Valley from Cook Inlet to eastern Norton Sound, 2,000 feet still all the way up to just about Point Lay, and 2,000 to 6,000 feet across the southeast Bering and the Alaska Peninsula. Icing, got this zone of moisture coming up to the north here with that intense storm that's farther to the south. So look for the icing threats to increase here for the eastern Aleutians on the Alaska Peninsula. It looks like the bulk of the considerable moderate will possibly stay south of the area. This front up here, this portion of the front already weakening, in a weakening state. Could be a little bit of icing for around Kodiak, but nothing too significant. And also the southeast coast, mixed icing above 5,000 feet. And for the jet stream, upper level low here, sort of in the Gulf, they're kind of troughing out. And then northwest flow, the cold jet here, the Arctic jet coming into the north slope, and that keeping the cold air in over the northeast interior. Southeast flow here, eastern Bering Sea and along the coast. 9,000 feet, looking at southeast increasing 25, maybe 35 knots off the coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, not too bad in the interior, 10 to 20, maybe 25 knots. Kodiak Island, 35 knots, Alaska Peninsula area. And then the winds really associated with this storm that's south of the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, coming up to 55 knots, almost getting up to the Fox Islands in the afternoon. 35 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, even stronger winds farther to the south. And looking at turbulence, moderate chop, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, much of the Aleutians, and also up here over areas of the western interior, all the way up to the Brooks Range. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Have you ever been to the beach and noticed litter like plastic bottles or foam takeout containers on the sand? Or maybe you've been to a river or bay where there's a bag or a car tire stuck in the mud on the shore, or a bunch of deflated balloons that say "Happy Birthday" floating in the water? All of that junk in the water or on the shoreline is considered marine debris. It's anything solid and man-made in the ocean or Great Lakes that is not supposed to be there. And anything people use every day can become marine debris if they don't dispose of it properly. And I mean anything. The most common items we find when we do shoreline cleanups are plastics. But we also find rubber, cloth, glass, metal, and paper litter. Sometimes the debris is so tiny, like a plastic microbead from your face wash, that you can barely see it in the water. Marine debris is more than just trash in the ocean. Sometimes fishers lose their gear like fishing traps, nets, or fishing line, and it continues to drift through the water, catching animals for a long time. We call that derelict fishing gear, and it's marine debris. Have you ever seen an old boat left behind on a shoreline? Abandoned and derelict vessels are also marine debris. So let's review. Anything we use every day can become marine debris if we don't dispose of it properly or if it goes into the water by accident. Marine debris can be very small or can be very big, and anything in between. But most importantly, marine debris is one of the biggest pollution problems facing the world's oceans and waterways today.
How does marine debris impact the ocean, animals, and me? Would you want to swim in a beach littered with trash? Of course not. And the animals who live in the ocean don't either. The difference is, they don't have a choice. Marine species often get tangled in debris, from fishing nets to six-pack rings. If they get caught, they could get injured or even die. And even if they don't get entangled, many animals mistake plastic debris for food and eat it. This fills their stomach with junk they can't digest. Debris can also damage important habitats, like coral reefs, by breaking or smothering them. Corals serve as the base of the marine ecosystem, and impacts here can be felt all the way to you and me. Plus, plastics have harmful chemicals in them. Fish eat plastic, we eat fish. The question is, can those chemicals harm us? Marine debris also hurts the economy. It costs a lot of money to clean up, and people don't want to go to dirty beaches. Boats and ships could run into large pieces of debris too, or get their propellers tangled. We need the ocean and everything in it, and the ocean needs us to keep it free of debris. What can we do about marine debris?
A lot of the trash that's in our ocean is plastic.
And that marine debris is hurting our environment, economy, and health.
The problem will only get worse.
Unless we change the way we consume and dispose of products. There are solutions.
And together, we can prevent litter from ending up in the ocean. Some people might say,
Well, I'm just one person, so I can't make a difference.
but that's just not true.
If each person who creates trash, and that's just about everyone, took action, it would add up to a whole lot of change.
So what can we do?
Well, the ultimate solution is prevention. And we need to keep that as our highest priority.
We can reduce, reuse, and recycle to keep debris out of the ocean in the first place.
You can bring your own shopping bag, drink out of a reusable bottle, and participate in things like a shoreline cleanup.
Join a group cleaning up the beach or grab some friends and clean up your street. It's easy.
Be more conscious of how many disposable plastic items you're using. And if you do,
Where are you putting it? In the trash can? Whoops. Or in the recycling bin?
so here's the challenge. The next time you finish using a throwaway item, a bag, a bottle, or utensil, answer the question, where is this going? Because ultimately, when you throw stuff away, there really is no away. It has to go somewhere.
So keep asking yourself this important question.
How will you keep your trash from becoming marine debris?
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at coastal water forecasts here for the southern southeast coast. Southwest there coming into Prince of Wales Island, 20 knots, and small craft advisories farther up toward the central coast, 25 from the south, turn southeast at 30. East winds 30 knots for the area here along the coast near Yakutat. And northerly winds tomorrow at 25 knots for Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, seas at about 3 feet. Southeast 20 with gale force gusts there for Stevens Passage, and southeast 20 without the gale force gusts for Clarence Strait. And then for Wednesday, 30-knot winds sustained for Clarence Strait there, seas at about 6 feet. Southeast 20 gale force gusts continue for Stevens Passage, and southeast winds at 20 there for the far northern inside waters. Otherwise, we've got gales here all along the coast out for Wednesday. South 35 knots, seas up to 15 feet. And for the North Gulf Coast tomorrow, northeast winds 25 knots, seas 11 to 12 feet. Much lighter in Prince William Sound, barely a breeze at all out of the north. And then east 30 knots for the Barren Islands, become northeast here, blowing into Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories right up to the Forelands in Cook Inlet. Outlook for Wednesday. Northern Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, northeast 25, seas 5 feet. And gales now for southern Cook Inlet, northeast winds 35 knots, right on down in toward Augustine Island, Kamishak Bay, east 35, so gales also there for the Barren Islands, and then east-northeast 30 knots, just under gale force for the North Gulf Coast, seas 12 to 13 feet. And Prince William Sound, northeast at 20, with seas at 4 feet. For Shelikof Strait tomorrow, northeast winds at 35 knots, seas 13 feet, and then east winds from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Gale force east winds at 35, and almost a storm. Go 45 knots now. Looks like it should cover it tomorrow for the south side of the Alaska Peninsula here, Castle Cape to Cape Saratchev. Minimum gales on the north side of the peninsula, and northeast 30 knots there for the Bristol Bay area, and east 30 knots east side of Kodiak. And then those will drop off to about 20 knots and turn more southeasterly on Wednesday. Seas still at 17 feet though. Shelikof Strait northeast 30 knots, northeast 30 for Bristol Bay, northeast 25 to 30 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, strongest on the Pacific side, and Sitkinak to Castle Cape, east winds at 30. Fox Islands tomorrow, we do have a storm warning here for the marine zone south of Unalaska Island. Northeast winds 50 knots, seas 23 feet. Otherwise, pretty good gales there for Unmak Island and the north side of Unalaska Island, north to northeast 35 knots, 45 knots, south side. Adak and Atka, northwest winds 30 to 35 knots, seas 9 to 14 feet, and then the winds hold the small craft advisory levels here, become more westerly out towards Shimei and Attu. And those will drop down to about 15 knots from Shimei to Kiska, and then about 25 here at Kiska as you approach Adak. Central Aleutian specifically, northwest 30 knots, seas at about 12 feet. And small craft advisories for the eastern Aleutians, but still looking at gale force northwest winds south of Mac Island. And for the southwest coast, for the day on Tuesday, northeast, 20 to 30 knots, strongest along the Yukon Delta coast, 25 knot northeast winds for the Pribilofs, east 25 St. Lawrence Island, or St. Matthew Island and St. Lawrence Island. And the outlook for Wednesday, 40 knotters here from the Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, northeast 40, all the way down to Nunivak Island along the Yukon Delta coast. Gales here from the northeast for St. Matthew Island, north 25 for the Pribilofs. And for the Beaufort Sea coast here on the east side, north to northeast at 15, pick it up to 20 knots. Central coast, full gales here. On the west side, all the way down with 45 knot winds from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, 25 knot winds, Cape Thompson to Wales. Outlook for Wednesday, minimum gales here, but east 35, Wales up to Cape Thompson, and then the 40 knot winds will be in that zone from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. Pull it back down to 30 knots on the west side, northeast 20 on the central and east coast, over toward demarcation point just north at 10. For tonight, rain with this front continues. It gets a little heavier to the north and tries to lighten up down south, but continues. Diminishing showers, Kodiak, flurries, mainly along the Arctic coast. Some of that moisture could slip down into the far eastern interior, otherwise dry southern Alaska. Big storm here bearing down on, the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians, as we just saw in the marine forecast. And rain, wind tomorrow spreading northeastward, Kodiak Island, and next day pushes northeast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.